Osama bin Laden's declaration of war on the United States sent shockwaves around the world. In Berlin, on September 12, 2001, the German parliament was clearly shaken by the events in Washington and New York. Chancellor Gerhard Schröder struggled to find words to describe what had happened.
Yesterday, September the 11th, will go down for us all as a dark day in history. We are still stunned by this terror attack, of a kind that has never been seen before, on that which holds together the very core of our world.
Schröder saw the events in New York and Washington as an attack on the free world, and was one of the first to extend his condolences. He would later go on to condemn the Iraq War. But at that point, the then-Chancellor expressed his solidarity with the U.S. and joined in the war on terror against al-Qaeda and its supporters in Afghanistan. As a result, Islamist terrorists began to set their sights on Germany. There was news of terror threats and foiled attacks. Over 2 decades after the wave of attacks by German terrorists, fear resurfaced in Germany. The country's leading researcher on the psychology of fear believes the events in America had a long-term effect.
On September 11, 2001, the world was shaken to its very foundations, the Western world at least. We suddenly felt completely unsafe after feeling relatively safe for a long time, and that feeling continues to this day. We're still afraid of terror attacks, although they did exist prior to that.
The extremists managed to dominate the political agenda. Fighting terrorism became the most important task faced by the 4 German interior ministers in the decade after the attacks. The reaction of the first, Otto Schily, was swift and tough.
It's imperative that we stop the work of such associations that use religious activity as a camouflage for completely different purposes.
A new anti-terrorism program was quickly implemented. Under this legislation, it became possible to ban religious groups. Within just a few weeks, 10 changes were made to German law in connection with the Islamist threat. Schiele's successor, Wolfgang Schäuble, took further steps 4 years later.
The situation remains as serious as it was. We are at risk, and there are forces that are preparing attacks against us. But luckily, there are also forces that are doing all they can to prevent that. Under certain circumstances, we will have to encroach upon basic rights.
The balance between security and the rights of citizens was reassessed. Some critics feared that Western democracies were starting to resemble police states. The Bulgarian-German author Ilya Troyanov referred to what he saw as an attack on freedom.
Right across the entire EU and across the entire so-called Western world, individual rights, human rights are being dismantled and security is being increased. Whereby security is an extremely controversial concept because it is very emotional. People feel safer because of things that don't increase their safety. CCTV cameras don't stop crime.
Some measures, such as dragnet investigation, were highly controversial. This was used to access private data. More than 19,000 people ended up in a database of suspects. Not a single one turned out to be a terrorist. In 2006, the German Constitutional Court curbed the use of dragnet investigation. Constitutional Court judges also overturned legislation requiring the storage of telecommunications data for 6 months. This after 35,000 plaintiffs, the most ever to be involved in a single case in Germany, submitted a complaint. Interior Minister Wolfgang Schäuble came up with a whole range of ideas to protect the state against terrorism, from online monitoring searches to the shooting down of kidnapped passenger jets by the military. The third Interior Minister, Thomas de Maizière, called for new means to fight terrorism, such as the introduction of full-body scanners at airports. Now, tests have shown they trigger too many false alarms. But are these steps mainly intended to calm citizens' fears?
The security measures that we see everywhere, including at airports, just don't reassure us. In fact, at the moment that we go through the security checks, we become conscious of the dangers that we face. But I think frequent flyers get used to it.
But how great is the threat of a terrorist attack in Germany? This week, the current Interior Minister, Hans-Peter Friedrich, said the dangers remained real. In a newspaper interview, Friedrich referred to a possible 1,000 Islamic radical suspects and called for new technological means.
The authorities here have more than enough instruments to fight the threat. And you can't constantly exaggerate this danger. Since I've been concerned with this topic, I read in almost all the daily newspapers speculation that makes a mountain out of a molehill.
Up to now, Germany has been spared the carnage that has been seen, for example, in Spain or the UK. Most of the planned attacks were foiled, but al-Qaeda terrorists have changed the face of Germany and continue to do so 10 years after September 11th.